Thanks for tuning into the program. You are listening to Show and Tell. I am your host, Samira Moayed, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a clue as to who our next guest is. Boom, 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 ba-da-dum, bum, 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 boom, 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 boom. If you can't tell, that is me butchering the theme song to Succession, which means our next guest is none other than that bastard of a guy, Stewie, played by the amazing Arian Moayed. Stay tuned, he's up next. Okay, so I'm gonna hit record.
Yeah, hit it.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're recording. So the premise of the show, I had reached out to you, is whether it's a story or an object or an item of any kind that most makes you feel like home, a home that you can't return to for whatever reason. And I know that you're on set. Maybe you don't have the item with you, but if you want to describe it or tell the story. So what is that item for you?
I think I've thought about this a ton because there's so many little jijimigi, like little knickknacks that
trinkets,
little trinkets that everyone brought over. But the thing that I don't have with me, but is in my office in New York, and I will send a picture. Someone will send the picture of, is actually this little jijimigi. It's like a little one. It's like a one-person pencil. It's like a one pencil holder.
Oh wow!
And it sat on my dad's office desk in Iran and in Dubai when we escaped and went to Dubai for a bit. And the one business that he had in the States that didn't do super well.
So I can picture this thing. They were really popular in the 50s. They're like a thing that you set on your table. It's got something sticking out of it, and then you put your pen or pencil in there.
Yeah. And it's on a swivel in the middle that just kind of like swivels all the way around. And it's got that beautiful miniature iruni, with the felt underneath.
Yeah.
And the reason why it makes me feel like home is a bunch of reasons. Is because I think it represents one big thing, is it represents that my family's ability to come from like lower middle class to like upper middle class Iran in the 60s and 70s. I think my father kind of like leaping out of there and becoming a banker, and that kind of like, that represents a lot of that kind of like, I don't know, just that entrepreneur
upward mobility in that way.
Mobility, that crash. I don't know if you knew this, Samuel Jumba, in 1979, an Islamic regime came and took everything.
No way. Tell me about it.
Google this.
I'll Google it after we talk.
Yeah. And then they kept that. My dad kept that and then brought it to Dubai. And when we had a little Persian rug store, and he had it there, and then we had a Persian rug store in the States, and that was also on his desk. And now it's on my desk. And it reminds me of home because that miniature inlaid little work that's like always
the textiles.
Around. The textiles that's always there. It also is handmade. You can feel that it's handmade. The felt feels underneath feels really old.
Is there any wood involved?
Oh yeah, it's made out of wood.
Yeah.
Those little all those amazing miniature, long with all the horses and the men that are always
yes.
bordered. What do you call that in Farsi?
Persian? I'm not sure. I know that miniature.
Miniature. That's all I know.
Let me say it in the Persian accent. Miniature is correct, which I think are those, as you refer to them, it's not a cartoon, but it's almost like caricatures of like someone sitting and like offering an apple to someone else, or like an orange, or like
someone's playing a guitar and someone's
exactly. Yeah.
And so the framing is made of, the whole thing is made of that framing. Of that little miniature. Yeah, it's so funny. All I could keep on saying is miniature.
In different accents. So I was wondering, so you're telling your story through this miniature piece, and you said that, in 1979 there was a revolution or whatever. At what point did your family leave Iran? Like, what is your exodus story?
It was it was just a chaotic, like everyone's was crazy. So my oldest brother, Amir, who's 19 years older than me, was in Chicago
Oh,
studying
at the time.
at the when the revolution happened. That in itself was just odd. Like no one in my family was doing stuff like that, but my brother was in studying. So that's part one of how we even got to the States. Um, and then I was born in 80, and then my family really wanted to get out pretty quick just because they knew that the shit was hitting the fan and they knew that stuff was okay. Even though they were probably supporting him because they were anti-Shaw people, when it started happening, they were like, this is not it. But my other brother, Omid, he fought. He was in Jeppe. He fought.
Oh, in the Iran-Iraq War. Wow.
For 2 years. So we stayed even longer. So we eventually got to Dobe, and in '86 we got to the States.
Okay.
So it was about 6 years.
And so you were 6 years old.
Nomadic, then. Really. Like Tehran for 3 years, Dobe for a month. Just trying to piece together whatever you can to get out. But we, as you know, we weren't of the group of. We weren't of not the class, but we weren't of the group of people that was exiting prior to the revolution. People that left prior to the revolution had like a place to go. They had had a degree. They were about to get a degree. It was just like all ready to go. My family was not ahead of any of that. They were always on so 86 is when we landed in Chicago.
So you were 6 years old.
6, yeah.
Yeah. And what do you remember most about your time in Iran? Like what has stayed with you the most?
I mean, my therapy answer would be fear. Look, the thing that I remember more than anything was just a constant state of fear that I still think is a big portion of like my engine. We were, we lived in Tehran. My family was always arrested. It was like my family was so anti any.
You were just getting in trouble, eh? You were just rabble rousers.
My dad was in the 50s. My dad was in prison at Evin for 3-4 times. My brother was fighting in the Iran-Iraq War. My other brother was in the States protesting. My sister was on the street. All I remember is that kind of like fear of the unknown. We had a basement, and in the basement we had that corsi.
Yes, yeah.
Which is a low table where you put heat, like wood or something underneath.
Yeah, and everyone gathers around.
Yeah, and you put your feet underneath, and you just like everyone gathers and drinks tea and and other things. And I just remember that we were always there, and I didn't realize this until I was much older. We were in the basement because of the bombing.
The bombings.
Sirens. Those sirens were always, and I remember the sirens very vividly. So I just remember all of that. And then, it was just so sad. My cousin Hamid died in the Iran-Iraq War. All of a sudden, everything got clouded and dark. My family is there. I do have a lot of family members that are Muslim. And I could also, I could see how they were complicated about the whole thing because they're not, they're not extremists. You know what I mean? Like and then to be real, I just remember all of these little pieces of when Hamid died, in Tehran, there was, that Zenji, what is that called?
Yeah, like a self-flagellation. It's like a mourning ceremony, really.
Mourning ceremony, because my cousin died. I kind of just like a little kid walking around, 2-3 years old. It was just kind of that kind of stuff. Tears, fear, and as an adult, 44 years old, a lot of therapy people call it catastrophizing, and so I still kind of do that. I still imagine the worst case scenario might be happening, and I'm trying to solve the problem of what that worst case scenario might happen. And I feel like that was those first years, those first 6 years.
I learned that worst case scenario, I learned the word for that recently, intrusive thinking. So that you're sort of going about your day and you're like looking at something and you're like, what if that car hit me? Or what if that, you know what I mean? And that is a thing. Like there's an actual.
I think I learned that at a young age because I feel like we were always ready to go. I feel like, I don't know if the bags were literally packed, but I always felt like the bags were literally. My parents just knew it. My dad worked at Banque Meli. Banque Meli was like the national bank. It literally means national bank.
Beautiful bank. One
Beautiful
of,
bank.
I think, the oldest bank in Iran.
And he worked there, and he was, before the revolution, was going to Dubai and like trying to like figure out like a Banque Meli at Dubai, and they opened that up. And when the revolution hit, as you can imagine, the mullahs were like, you know what, we should run the banks.
Yeah.
I don't know. Something tells me I should run the banks. And so they offered my dad either to retire, which he took, or to work in some podunk, don't mean it like that, some small town elsewhere out of Tehran, and we're Tehranis like for generations. And so my dad knew it. Why would that be the deal? Because they want to take the money, because it was just obvious and pretty quick. And so, yeah, it never felt, the other tricky portion of this was, and I remember this as a kid too, it's just, do we have the right visa? I just remember all that stuff.
Wow.
Into the States.
Yeah, something a kid shouldn't be thinking about, right?
My mom and my dad, they're amazing human beings. But, they were 43 and 53 when they landed in the States with very, not a lot of education under their belt. And the chances of them like learning and mastering this language and picking it up and going to school and all that, it was daunting, and if not impossible. And so those first, 10 years of just navigating that as a young boy. And again, now my family is much older. So my brother Amir is, doing this. Everyone's like doing life. You know?
And did you become the sort of family translator? Did you become the paper pusher, filling out everything? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, period. I mean, my brother helped out. Yeah. But it was me and my brother, really. And when I didn't know, Amir would kind of figure it out. It's just so much older than me.
Arian, do you think of yourself as someone who's in exile?
I do think of myself as an exile because I'm so Iranian at the heart of it. But I don't consider myself an exile because I've not spent any time there. So it's just a weird little balance there. And I respect Iranians too much to pretend that I know everything about Iran. That's just too disrespectful. So I would not also say that I'm an exile in that way. But I think my mom and my dad might, I don't know if what they would call it now, but I think my mom and my dad might. I say this to students all the time of like, if God forbid, America or Canada or whatever, or Europe doesn't happen, and we have to like all head up and go, and we all have to go to somewhere in China, we're going to have a real tough time. How about this? I'll speak just for myself. To go into the grocery store that first day, not speaking literally a word or not knowing the culture, I would be at collapse level of anxiety. And somehow or another, I think my parents managed that somehow. I think, I think they took a lot on the face. They took a lot of hits on the face. But they really took the hit of just leaving Iran and just leaving their Vatan, their language, their...
I don't think you ever get over that. Like, I don't think our parents ever really got over that.
Do you consider yourself in exile? When did you come over?
Well, we came over in 79. Yeah, right away. I was only 4. But I did go back in 1999 for a couple months. I do consider myself an exile because, and I give it a very sort of textbook definition, because I can't go back, even though I want to. So I do consider myself in exile in that way.
Yeah. Same. I mean, none of us are going to go back.
Yeah. I mean, I would go back if things change, but at this point, I wouldn't.
You would. I don't know if you'd imagine this, but I don't think it would be healthy for you.
No. I don't think so.
A couple things. Hitting up. Yeah.
I want to get to how you got to acting. And I know this is a big leap, from 6-year-old landing in Chicago, but Chicago is very known for its theater scene.
Yep.
And so how did you come to acting? How did you know, oh, this is what I want to do? This is my passion.
You know, I there's a bunch of little answers to this. And one thing that, again, recently figured out in the last, I would say 2 or 3 years, as a 44-year-old looking at that time period, was was that the trauma that was happening of just getting to the States kind of exacerbated when we got to the States, because we didn't really realize that Iran was that hated in the 80s. I mean, we knew that we were enemies, but holy fuck, did we know? We had no clue that we were like enemy number one.
Yeah.
And that was shocking even as a 6 or 7-year-old. But one thing that, again, this is now my 44-year-old brain remembering that moment. I'm sure when I'm 54, something's going to change. But one thing I definitely remember was that we went often to the Northrop Public Library, and we would go get some movies because they were free. And we bring those movies home. And you can imagine, I wanted to watch anything that was color, just color.
Yeah.
And my mom and dad are like, oh, Baba, North by Northwest.
North by Northwest. That's my mom.
North by Northwest shit.
Cary Grant.
We got to bring Sound of Music up. So we would watch these movies and Charlie Chaplin movies. And you got to imagine, it was just like, what the actual F is happening?
Yeah.
And I would eventually laugh because it would be fun and dumb. And my parents would fall over and reminisce about, do you remember when we went to the movie theater and everyone saw it and we saw, and I don't think I know what happened subconsciously is I went into the bedrooms and started mimicking a pratfall, literally trying to see, like, I think it was maybe even Jack Tripper of Three's Company. Like,
he's a magic at that. Incredible.
Incredible. But I saw him like go for a wall and just like, whoosh. And I remember going and doing it over and over and over again. And I guess what I was doing was, oh, here must be a tool that could help make my family feel a little better.
Wow. Yeah.
I think that's what I actually was doing.
Yeah.
Again, I wasn't like, here's my mission, but I think that's what was happening. And I got really good at it. And also, Iranians are such storytellers. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so every Saturday when everybody would cram into our little small apartment and we'd have like meetings, or when Khomeini died, we all had a party at our house, and it was just like a whole thing. And when all that was happening and we were doing all these things, I would hear these stories, and I feel that everything that I do now is I'm re-copying those stories in a weird way. You know what I mean? And then there's another portion of this that I think is really, really very Irani and very like my brand of like art making, which is, we lived in this place called unincorporated Northbrook, still exists, which is essentially an apartment complex that lives on the other side of the highway. But all these kids, basically black, brown immigrants, black, brown, Asian, anyone that was other, went to the fancy public school.
Okay.
Because in the North Shore of Chicago, there's these fancy schools. So somehow or another, my family figured out to get me to this rich neighborhood.
So you can go to that
school. Go to the fancy school. Yeah. We lived in this apartment complex. And, my mom she was putting a lot of things on the table trying to make anything happen. Childcare. She worked at a childcare. We had kids' childcare. My dad was trying to put pieces together. But man, every time I'd come home from the bus and we had a small apartment, and I'd come in and there would be somebody that just landed into Salem Walk yesterday.
Oh my God. Yeah. It sounds like my house. Yeah.
And my mom was like, we're going to have dinner with him. And I'm like, Mom, what the Mama, yes.
Oh my God.
And then the one that I always tell is that my parents pretty not religious. My parents in a family, both sides were very religious. One time I come home, there's 2 Greek Orthodox Christians or something with the this and the robe and the whole thing. I'm like, Mama, You can't. I said, like, you. What are we doing here? He's like, nah, this sham mechon. Yeah, sham. Sham. It's like, okay. So we would then sit down. They speak Greek. I speak English. My mom, and we'd have Persian food. And
Amazing.
then they'd leave. And then my mom would never. She'd always do that. And that type of whatever you want to call it. Mehunavazi.
Yeah. Again, you were always ready. You were like coming home from school. You don't know who's going to show
going
up.
to be there. Yeah. Like, boom, oh, we're doing this. And also like cleaning and making sure that I help my mom with all these things and helping other people that were just strangers was so a part of my family's kind of MO on the world that I feel somehow or another I got a chance to see all of these stories and empathize with a bunch of people that I knew nothing about. Even those Greek folks that felt exiled in some sort of way, that we were all of a sudden there. There was a lot of kids from Taiwan that were there that were escaping, and I don't know all the details of why that in the 80s that was happening. And my parents would just constantly, and that I feel that like empathy building or listening skills is kind of how I've dedicated my artistic life, because I really think the tools that art brings to understand other people is actually cheaper, easier, and simpler to actually solve some of these problems instead of trying to be like, well, I read that they blah, blah,
Is that
blah.
your definition of good theater? That sort of putting a lens and understanding the other.
Can be. August Wilson has something that he calls the 3 cylinders, which I really love. And the 3 cylinders are, it has to hit the interpersonal. Romeo loves Juliet. Juliet loves Romeo. It has to hit the global. The Montagues hate the Capulets for whatever reasons. They hate each other, and that turns into Democrat, Republican, us, them, name it. And that's always in the thrusts of great art. And the third piece, which I think is most Westerners actually really scared of, and most Easterners aren't, is the spiritual. And in Romeo and Juliet, it could be about Catholicism, it could be about Christianity, but it's also like, how far do we go for love? Which is actually a spiritual thing. And when you run on all 3 of those cylinders nonstop, you're bound to have at least a thought-provoking evening at the theater and art. Even when you're looking at a piece of art, when it starts hammering away on a bunch of different things, and you start realizing that, like, oh, this is much bigger, So I kind of like gauge. Good
segue for me. Good segue for me. So the first time I actually ever heard of you, it wasn't Succession. It was because I saw this thing. I didn't see the play, but I saw the ad for it. And then I saw, wait a second, because I was like, oh, this is a Iranian Hamlet. And then I saw that it's actually, some of it is in Persian. So can you tell? Yeah, and can you take me through Hamlet in Persian, how this came about, and then of course you can tell me about Waterwell, but I really want to know how this came about.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you saying that. I'm so proud of that Hamlet. Yes, it was is in Persian and in English. It was set in 1917 Tehran. I was doing a play at the Public Theater. I was doing King Lear and I was playing Edgar, and then the conversation happened that like, oh, you should play Hamlet. And I was kind of like, oh, I'm never doing Shakespeare again after this King Lear.
Why?
Because it's so hard. It's so difficult. And and at that point I was basically only doing new plays. And every time you do an old play, everyone's got like, well, the Hamlet that I saw.
Yeah.
So it gets a little like annoying, especially in the New York theater crowd. But they kept on pressing it. And then someone said, all great Hamlets are based on who that person is. Like that Hamlet is based on what it is. And we were started developing it, I guess, in 2015, I'd say. And then it went up in 2017. We did a bunch of readings and whatnot. And at the time, I should also mention that everyone was doing something called colorblind casting, which I don't know for any of your listeners or viewers. Basically, that means like, I don't care about if you're black, white, Iranian. I don't care. We're all just going to do the play as if we're like one unit. And that became very popular, but something that I really, really was pretty against, to be honest with you, because I think
Interesting.
specificity is really important. And I think that trying to hit the check mark of making sure that it's represented by a Benetton ad is sometimes great, but sometimes dangerous when we don't get specificity. And so we did what we would call a colored production of Hamlet, set in 1917 Tehran, of which Hamlet has been, just like many of those aristocrats at that time, were studying in Europe. Hamlet was the child of an Iranian warrior king, like Reza Shah. And his wife was a blonde, blue-eyed American. And so Hamlet all of a sudden fits into this, is he East or is he West? And so when he comes back, he's dressed. And in 1917 Tehran, during that time period, so many, not just on the national level, the Brits were so involved that British was sexy. It was like, get the car, get this phonograph, get the electricity. And we put it right there where the court is Western. Until Hamlet's dad, the Reza Shah, comes and only speaks to me in pure iambic pentameter, pure Farsi.
That's wild. This is what blew my mind.
And we did it in a taziyah. Yes. So the taziyah is the round, because the biggest traditional Iranian format is a round, circular, religious, the martyrdom.
Like theater in the round. Yeah.
So we purposely put it in the round. And when I hear the ghost say this to me in Farsi and only in Persian, I then go back 50 years and I dress as a nomadic Iranian man that's now only speaking in Farsi. So it wasn't about him being crazy or not. It was him about be proud of being Iranian. And that just kept on boom, 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 hitting and butting up against each other in a way.
So is that your existential sort of question in the play? Was that dichotomy between East and West?
I think for if the task at hand is to play Hamlet as close as like I can make it with this kind of like structure. Also, I'm not going to rewrite the words here.
Yeah.
That was something that was really personal to me and still is, that we have been told our entire lives, especially in those early 80s, that being Iranian is the worst thing in the world, which is such a juxtaposition of who we are as people. Just the way that we're represented as the women class is represented in our culture on television is so, and the antithesis of who we are as people. No Iranian family is the mother and the woman of the patriarch, the matriarch, the most important person, but you can't even like combat any of that. And what was amazing was so many Iranians in the New York City saw Hamlet for the first time. And we'd know this because every night when Gertrude drank, every night, Nakuna! And then all of us would backstage be like, "Have you never seen the play?" We would have Iranians come to us and say, "We can't even picture seeing anything about our culture prior to the Islamic regime. Just the idea that we were dressing in Western clothes in 1917 for Iranians is mind-altering." And for Americans that would see it, they would say, I would hear this all the time. Every person in America should see this production of Hamlet because they don't even think that we, you know what I mean? They didn't even think of us as people, much less aristocrats.
Yeah.
That got me, and all of those juxtapositions kind of just really like fell into place in a very deep and meaningful way. And it was in the round. So there was rugs on the ground. Some people would sit on the ground and like, it was a beautiful,
it's amazing.
magical...
I wish, do you have I'd love to see a video. I mean, you must have some. Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
because I really.
But just you, no one else.
Yeah, no, I won't broadcast it. The thing is, too, like I always thought when I saw that this was being made and it was Persian, because I've always thought of Iran as Hamlet, like the nation could play Hamlet. You know, this sort of character that is full of reason to act, but just can't quite
Can't do it.
get there. You know, and suffers the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. You know, it just goes through all of these things, but just can't quite get there. You know,
it's so Iranian, isn't it? Yeah,
it really is. Yeah,
and also the rationality of Hamlet's understanding of what the next steps are is every Iranian knows this. Everyone knows that, like, oh, this happens and this happens and this happens. But that first step, especially when it gets crushed so brutally, becomes another barrier, because you're just like, how many times are we going to have another person get, you know, how many Massa Amini revolutions do we fucking need?
Yeah.
And so that's tragic. And that goes through Hamlet as well. You know, Hamlet is constantly trying to be like, how many times am I going to be second burner on this? And how many times can I fight? And should I fight now? And also just the mere, we are addicted in the most beautiful way, I think, to a culture and a farhang, a culture that is so rich of art and beauty and progressiveness and, you know, a lot of gorgeous stuff. We're all wanting to bring that back, but it's so tricky and so impossible to fight that narrative here, definitely over there. And so Hamlet's constantly in that battle. Constantly.
Is there a soliloquy of his that, like, I'm sure you remember these lines because they never
that. All Shakespeare people are going to be like, you lose.
No, but is there no I don't want you to perform it, but is there a soliloquy that most speaks to you in that play?
God, there's so many. I love so much, you know. There's a speech that he gives that I'm going to totally butcher, that he gives to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and the two gentlemen that played Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and they came back. And, you know, in the original Shakespeare, the first 15 lines are about, like, did you get to the bottom of her shoe? It's all like sexual innuendo. Are you fucking that girl? Are you fucking this girl? It's like all like, and so we did it all in Farsi. It's just like real, like, dirty kind of like. And then he gives this huge speech of, like, you know, again, I'm going to totally butcher this, but how feeble man is. You know, this great, you know, firmament in the sky, this beautiful earth that we live on, and how.
Oh, it's the I have of late, but wherefore I know not, lost all my mirth. And indeed, it goes so heavily with my disposition.
Yeah, and that, see, you know better than I do. And again,
I'm obsessed with the play.
Yeah. Also, and that what's also amazing about that piece is that little chunk is that it's hopeless, but it's also hopeful because he's saying it. Yeah. And there's something about that really feels very hopeful for me in with regards to Hamlet and Iran, because I just know that this is not going to last forever. It just can't. It won't.
Yeah, it's he says, "Oh, what a piece of work is a man." Yeah.
Oh, what a piece of work is a man. See, now every person that's like, he doesn't know. But I love that piece.
No, know that's like.
And I also love, you know, there's this piece that Tom Ridgely. This is a Waterwell piece as well.
This was your Horatio.
No, Tom was the director of this. I'm kind of the adapter of, like, the English portion of so much of this. Tom and I, you know, we gave this. We wanted to do this play in, like, a real, but no one. There was two. I don't know. They didn't want to do it. You guys can tell me why. And so we had to do this Waterwell to kind of perform this ourselves. And when we were going through this, there was this whole section where he's talking to Horatio after he's just come back, and I think he's killed Guildenstern maybe on the way. He's killed some people, and now he's, like, talking about this. And there's rough hew them how you will. He's talking about these, like, hatches. And that's the let be monologue, you know, where there's a little bit of, like, listen, we're going to do the best that we can on earth, but at a certain point we have to let it go and let it all just kind of take us forward. And I hope that for all of us individually on that interpersonal level, that we can have that kind of clarity of mind at the end of our days. I find that that's so that we can be like, oh, you know what? We did what we could to move the needle, and now it's time for us to let be. Is that depressing?
No, it just makes me think, right back to sort of the height of that woman life freedom.
Yeah.
And what was going on. And so many people that I've spoken to are just feel so crushed after, because like I was talking to Salman Arbabi, who I know that also. And he was saying that I really did think that I'm going back.
Like, yeah, me too.
So, you thought that too?
I thought so.
Yeah.
I thought so too. I thought, did you not? Did you thought like
I did. Yeah.
I could see that. I just know, for me, the woman life freedom movement was just another needle that it's just more and more and more. And I feel like these things are happening smaller and smaller. And you know what I mean? They're kind of like the time period between them are like getting trickier.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think the people of Iran are not going to be able, if we just talk economics, I just don't think that this is going to last.
It's inevitable, basically, what you're saying. It's bound to happen.
Even if you are the most brutal regime, which they are, you gotta get these. Every one of our cousins has like 8 degrees, and no jobs. It's crazy. It's actually madness, and they all speak 7 languages, and that shit is just. I always kept on saying with Women Life Freedom, with those girls that were always in the schools like protesting every day, what are you going to do with them when they're 25?
Yeah.
How are you going to deal with that? So I just feel that needle is just moving a little bit further and further and further,
and faster, as you were saying.
Faster. And I think the time, because 2019, really, that November, December 2020, that was like a big bob on, and then the PS, the flights, and all that was like right there, and so
I want to come to this. Do you ever get sick of hearing this? Yeah?
No, I never did.
Oh, you don't, right? It's pretty iconic. And so was this character of Stewie.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because you really, he sort of burst onto the scene and you don't know how to feel about him, right? He's kind of sneaky, he's kind of smarmy, but you kind of love him.
Yeah. I think that's
and I want to know, like, where did you go to sort of find pieces of yourself in Stewie to play that character?
Yeah. These folks at the top 0.0000001%. I have a I'll just speak personally on a political level, on the global level.
Yeah.
I find the billionaire class slightly insane. I find the whole idea that you can make $1 billion+ and not pay taxes in the United States dangerous, horrible, horrific, unfair. I feel all those things. But the thing that makes all rich people continue to be rich is their complete disregard for basically anyone else but their bottom line. And when you remove that, when you remove the idea that you have like morality or ethics that don't matter, and you can do whatever the hell you want, I kind of felt incredibly free, to be real with you. Like I have this much money that I'm making these kind of deals. I can say and do whatever the fuck I want because nobody, we know this today. Billionaires are getting away with murder and not going to jail. And so that was one portion of it. The other portion of it is that is that there is a level. I read the pilot. I tested. I don't know if you knew this, but I tested for the pilot.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah,
I tested for the pilot, and I didn't get it for the part of Lawrence, and it didn't work out. It wasn't the right fit or whatnot. And then when they came back, and they were doing episode 3, and they had this new guy Stewie in there. Really, to be real with you, I didn't have another hedge fund D-bag idea. Like I had one, it was what you saw, and that's what I was gonna do. But the second time I did it, I gave less of a fuck now. I even gave less of a fuck.
Yeah.
And then so that's one portion of it. The other thing is that Jesse is writing this like really dense, almost Shakespearean language, and I care about language a lot, and so I also am very interested in watching. When I watch something, I want to make sure that I feel like it's super real. Like I'm like, holy fuck, is they improvising? Are they like and that show is like full of that. So I just fell into that pocket, luckily. But that language, especially in that first scene with the donut scene, was the driving force. And so if I just cooled down, stuck to the language, and then I'm a theater person, and I'll never forget this. I've also known Jeremy since I was 19 years old. So I show up to set, and the first thing I notice, I'm like, are you guys shooting on film? They're like, yeah. I'm like, actual film.
Wow.
I was like,
yeah.
Okay. He's like, oh, also, we don't rehearse. I said, okay. And then they're like, and it was like basically 2 scenes. It was like an indoor scene and an outdoor scene. And then they're like, we're thinking that we're actually just going to shoot both indoor and outdoor. I'm looking outside, I'm like, it's raining. They're like, we got umbrellas. I said, oh, so we're going to do the scene. And then once we get to the door, we're going to pick up umbrellas and we're going to go outside and we're going to do the scene outside. They're like, yeah, I was like, okay. And like, you want to try that? I was like, sure. I mean, fuck it, we're here.
Yeah.
And that, I think I know myself as an actor. I know a lot of actors. I think this would drive a lot of actors to wait, time out. What's going on?
Yeah.
But I was just like, all right, I don't, and I kept on, and my whole theory is the first one's going to be whatever, but then they'll get better. And then I kind of just knew. I just kind of knew that. And I knew Jeremy. And there was like some kerfuffle with one of the extras, maybe not one of the background artists not getting the donut in time. And so I think like someone was like, just jump over and grab the donut. I was like, okay. I actually had this whole bit where I would eat the donut and I would pretend to be playing basketball with Kendall.
Oh my God, amazing. Yeah.
And I would just go by him and I'd dunk and I'd be like, scored over you. Just because I've known this kid. So it was a little bit of that. And then I think it was literally the not giving a fuck that just really sparked an interest. And I kept on saying to everyone, I was like, why would he give a fuck?
Yeah.
Why would he care? Well, he's still going to have $1 billion. It's not like these people are going to have 10 billion and you're going to fuck them over and they're going to have 0. They're just going to fuck them over and they're going to have 8 billion.
Yeah.
And so that's part 1 of it. And then part 2 of it is, I think, Jesse was trying to figure out what the last name of this guy's going to be.
Yeah.
And it was the day that I was shooting the scene in West Rica where I was shooting the scene where I was saying, everyone fucking hates you to Logan. And I saw he was actually typing in one of the, room. It might have been Shiv's office. So I just knocked on the door and I walked in and I said, hey, can I just talk to you about his last name? And I told him, I gave him a whole speech. You would love this. I said, here is why I think he should be Iranian. He came in the 50s and he's oil money and this scenario. Or he came in the 70s, got out, got this, came in, blah, blah. Or he came in the 80s, came up with fucking nothing, got into tech, blah, 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 da, da, da. Like, I gave him like three scenarios,
yeah,
of like how this could happen. But then I could tell he's kind of like, I don't know if he knows this is not this type of show. So I kind of was like, and also one thing, I never want to talk about this on the show. I just want to argue that it's so important that he's Iranian. And so either he or I or we both came up with Husseini, which was enough of a name that sets it Iran, sets it, maybe he came in the 80s, maybe they came, it puts in a lot of, vague kind of like things about it. And it was important to me because so many of the people, as you know, that run Silicon Valley are Iranian. And nobody knows fucking shit all about it. And they don't probably, from whatever their catastrophe stories are, they're probably not still not like broadcasting that for the billions of reasons why we know. And but they exist, and some part, and again, as my like artist as citizen, that's like the Waterwell like phrase that we use, the artist as citizen. I don't need the story to be about an Iranian immigrant that came in '86, that Stewie Husseini that now is this. I just need him to exist in this world as Iranian, and it's all cool. It's not. He's fun.
It's not a thing. Yeah.
It's not a thing. He's a shark. He doesn't lie. He's not a liar. You know what I mean? That's a beautiful quality. He tells you how it is. I'm going to fuck you over, or I'm not going to fuck you. He says it as it is. And I thought those were just the engines that we need on a show like this, just to keep the engine moving. And I think that to me, sometimes, if you look at the history of just the world, we all want to just immediately turn on the switch and be like, okay, revolution over, and now it just doesn't play that way. And so that fader that I keep talking about, is that was really important to me. And again, I think he's very Iranian to me.
Yep, I do. Yeah, I agree.
He's like always caring for him. He's even when he's like, everyone fucking hates you, he's like, I'm so sorry, but no one's.
And he's so truthful, right? He's like that aunt who tells you, you look really ugly today. What's going on with you?
Yeah, you have not been sleeping. Yeah, obviously you haven't been sleeping.
I want to pick up on what you said just when you were going through that umbrella scene and talking about, coming from theater and going into this. A lot of the people in that cast are from the theater scene.
Yeah.
Do you see a difference, like when you're playing opposite someone who's used to the stage versus the screen?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can. You definitely can. The theater is really insane. You know what I mean? Just, you don't get paid. It's 8 shows a week. It's fucking grueling. If you're in a fucking flop, bro, it's 6 months of hell. You're just like painful. But the exhilaration of that live performance is just so, it's so exciting.
The immediacy of it too.
The immediacy of it, the completely understanding of it. I feel I've been more changed from, I think most people have, from a live experience over a filmed experience. Even as children, we think of these moments when I saw blank and I saw concert, play, ballet, anything, literally anything. Sometimes it's like I saw a magician live in front of me. And so in a way, that engine's really kind of like very exciting. I think the theater is always, I talk about this a lot, but there are 2 things that are left on this earth when we're all dead and buried. And those are the wars that we have fought and the art that we have made. And those are basically it. And art is buildings, art is so many things. And when you go through time, when we look back at the past, so much of Iranian culture has pieced together from Aeschylus's The Persians. You know what I mean? Like, so much of that. And the theater is the best empathy tool to make those kind of like distinct changes. And trust me, every 5 years they say, is theater dead? But it outlasted radio.
Yeah.
It outlasts.
They say that about radio too. Is radio dead?
Come on. Yeah. It's just like every single thing of this is constant. Like, you keep saying these things, but art lives and keeps going. Yeah, of course. Radio's turned into podcasts and streaming. It's the most bigger than ever it's been, I'm sure. Every time they tell you that these old things are going to die. And so when you're on stage and you see, I just had the privilege of working with the great Jessica Chastain, and you see her eyes telling you that she loves you, she hates you, she's leaving you, and she's sorry. That experience of just receiving that every night and giving it back, of how that feels to me, to her. If everyone could feel that, I think the world actually would be a better place.
For those who don't know, I'm just going to interrupt you a bit. It just, Arian and Jessica were in Henrik Ibsen's The Doll's House on Broadway, and actually came to see, which was
Yeah,
amazing.
my whole family too.
It was amazing to see her so still and just have the stage turning.
Rotate.
I mean, that it was really arresting being in the audience and seeing that.
Yeah, it was like nobody moved for like an hour and whatever long was.
And I would see that on Instagram, you would show your green room sometimes, your dressing room, and there was this little photo on the table in front of your sort of mirror. And it was you as a little boy. And I always wanted to ask you this. Why did you have that photo in the dressing room with you?
I have that photo kind of everywhere with me, not in London. It's being framed right now. It is my passport photo. And at that photo, we were in Tehran, and at the place where they were doing the photography, I wouldn't smile. And then my mom was like, just like...
Just trying to get you to smile.
And nothing. I'm just like, we're in the car, and my mom was like, this photo is like doomed. You look angry. And I explained to her that if they were going to shoot me, I wanted my eyes open. Because at that time period, there was this amazing man whose name I don't remember right now, who was going to go on the execution line. It's like 82, 83. And he said, no, I'm not going to do the blindfold. You're going to have to look me in the eyes if you're going to kill me. And they took a picture of him with his eyes open. And then I think, again, you have to Google all this, but what I was told as a young kid was everyone that was arrested and going to get executed is like, nope, now you're going to have to look me in the eyes. And that story must have come down to me, or I heard it underneath the corset one day or something. And I thought that camera must have been a gun. So that's part one of the story. I tell this to my mom in the car, and my mom is like, oh
my God, yeah.
And just
she laughs.
Laughs for years. I'm telling you, years she would tell this story. Years of like, hang out. And then I'm like 29, 30, 31, however old I was. I hear the story again in a public setting with family. And I'm like, wait, stop. What's the story? And then you start dawning on me. It was like, Mama, this is a bad story. This is a fucked up story. What do you mean? I thought I was gonna die? Chini. Nah, Baba.
Wow, that's wild.
And so I keep that with me to just know that a lot of people ask me, how do you get so much stuff done? How do you get water well? You have a nonprofit. First of all, it's a shit ton of people. It's not me. It's a shit ton of people. That's the first thing, really. And the second thing is, I just don't think it will ever probably be as bad as like that moment in that picture where I thought I was going to get executed, and that me not smiling was going to be bravery for my family. It just, again, I'm analyzing this about that time period.
Yeah, of course. I
wasn't like 4 being like,
look me in the eye, man, when you take my photo. Yeah,
exactly. So,
but you did feel that trauma at that age of what was happening around you. Yeah,
I must have, and I must have. When we got to the States, the people pleasing Irani Tarofi side just kind of took over for a while and just kind of buried some of that stuff that I'm trying to dig out. That's why I said when my mom tells this story, again, I've laughed at the story. It's hilarious. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, what's going on here? And then you start like analyzing. You're like, Mom, no, this is a bad story. This is a fucked up story. So.
I usually leave my sort of hard-hitting questions to the end. And so I want to ask you, qeymeh or korma sabzi?
Korma sabzi.
Why?
I mean,
is it the shambalile? Is it the fenugreek? Is it the
shambalile, the fenugreek, all of it? It's the limuya.
Oh, the limu amani,
amani. That fucking limu amani is amazing. It's so perfect with rice, perfect with anything. But qeymeh is amazing as well. What's yours?
Korma sabzi.
Yeah.
I go for that G all the time. Yeah,
you have to hit it.
And then haide or mahasti?
Ooh, Haida. My family was a Haida
You're a
family.
Haida family? Nice.
We're all Haida. Haida, she passed away early, like
Very
maybe
young
late
age. She
90s.
was 43. Very sad.
I
Yeah.
remember a family gathering at our apartment complex, that same apartment complex, a bunch of Iranians like and we had a cassette and we had a record player in which we would play Haida, and it was just like
Yeah. She
So I grew up with
was
Haida.
wonderful.
And then but we also grew up with like Shahram Nazari, Bijan
Oh yeah.
Motazari, you know, like
Mortazami. That song. That was like
we had that on tape. We went to concerts.
Yeah.
And those we anytime that happened, we all went.
Okay, well, it was lovely to talk to you.
You as well.
Always a pleasure.
Pleasure's always mine. Or what?
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Show and Tell. I am your host, Samira Moayed. Let me know what you thought of my conversation with Arian Moayed and who else you'd like to see on the program. Subscribe to the show, tell your lovers, tell your friends, tell your haters, tell your parents about it, okay? This episode and this show is executive produced by the good people over at the Iranian Diaspora Collective. The creative producer of Show and Tell is Darlene Hyun. Till next time, take care and stay tuned.